Alright guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to just tell you about a little bit about spring bass fishing and a couple of my favorite baits to catch fish in the early spring. Coming up, the actual spring I think is in like 2 days, the actual when it actually becomes spring. But the weather here is kind of all over the place. One day it's snowing, we literally had snow yesterday. The next day it's like 60 degrees and sunny out. But in the springtime, what I'm looking for is that water temperature to start warming. The water, depending on where you're at, how cold it gets, your lakes could be frozen, your lakes could be 40 degrees, your lakes could be 50 degrees during the winter. But for these lakes that around here, they're, usually in the low 40s to high 30s, 38, 42 degrees about. And now it went from about 42 degrees to about 45 degrees. So they're warming up. But they're not warming up, to where those fish are going to be shooting up shallow spawning, but they're slowly warming up. And these fish are slowly going to start getting active. And like I said, it's about 45 degrees right now, water temperature, out here on my home lakes. And it's still not quite, I'm still not quite fishing yet. I could go out there and maybe find something, but it's going to be really slow, really tough. I'm waiting for the water to hit 50. Me personally, when the water temperature hits 50 degrees in the springtime, that's when I start fishing. And I'm just going to show you a few baits I like to use and how I like to use them. Now, you could use, there's numbers of baits. I'm not going to try to limit you on baits that you can use. These are just some of my favorites. You could use, there's probably hundreds of different types of baits you could use this time of year and catch fish. All the way from a little, tiny finesse bait to a jerk bait, whatever it may be. But I'm going to show you 3 or 4 of my favorites. So first off, and this is, for those first warmer days when the water is just barely 50 degrees, or even now, even in the 45 degrees, even in the winter this will work. But it's a jig. Jig will pretty much catch fish, year round. Like I said, the water could be almost frozen and you could still catch a fish on a jig. Just because it's a good profile, so it's a good meal for these fish that are, feeding in the springtime. They're coming out of their, their winter haunts, and they're starting to get a little more active, starting to feed up for the spawn. And so, a jig like that, a bulkier presentation, it's a good meal, looks like a crawdad or a bluegill. A jig is a great bait to start throwing around year round, but in the spring I like to fish them, especially. And so when the water is at, 45 to 50 degrees, you can take this jig and you can drag it. This one here is an arky style jig. It's got, just that more rounded arky style head that you can basically do anything with. You can swim it, you could skip it, drag it, hop it, whatever. You could literally do anything with this jig. It's got a little craw trailer on the back. And this color here is hematoma. It's kind of like a black with a little bit of blue shade in there. That's really cool. And then that trailer there is saying that's a hematoma trailer, more of a black with some blue in there. But it's not that bright like black and blue. It's more black with a little kind of a blue sheen in it, if you will. And that's a great color for like dirtier water in the springtime when you're getting some warmer rains, the ice is melting, the lakes might be a little dirtier, but they're warming up a little bit. Great colors there. And with the jig, one thing is that, you really need to watch is that trailer on there. With the water being colder, I like to run a trailer with not as much action. This is just a little craw bait here, but it doesn't have a lot of, action. It's pretty just, slim, straight. There's not those like a rage craw has like the phalange on the end. They get a lot of kick. I like something with a little less kick, something with just a little natural flow to it. A beaver, a little craw like this. It doesn't really kick a lot. It's just a slow and natural, presentation in the colder water. And it works really good. I don't like a big aggressive bait when that water is still cold. But as the water warms up, you can start putting those aggressive trailers on there and fishing it faster. When that water's 45 to 52, 53, I'm just going to drag that jig. I'm going to, depending on what the fish are doing, if they're out a little bit deeper, you got a deeper body of water, a bigger reservoir where they're on deeper structure, deeper rock, throw it out there to drag it real slow. Or if you're on like a pond or a shallow lake, shallow dirty water where the fish are tucked up shallow, they're just stuffed up in the cover, flip that up in there, even take a flipping jig. If you're truly going to flip into some, brush or whatever, flip up in there and just let it soak. Let it soak in there, maybe just drag it a little bit and then let it soak. And then when that water warms up, you can start to swim it a little bit more, start giving it a little more hops, working it a little faster. The gear that I have, this is a Dobbins, but you could use any rod. This is kind of a medium heavy to heavy rod. You could use something, with a jig, a medium heavy rod, 7 foot to 7'3" is a really good jig rod, unless you're like flipping. But normal jig, like a little shorter rod, so you can skip it around cover. 7 foot to 7'3", medium heavy to heavy. 15 is a 15-pound fluorocarbon. Could go up to 20 pound. You could go to braid if you had dirtier water and you needed to. But anyway, that's the first thing I like to throw in the spring. Now, sometimes they don't want to eat. And a jig is more of that, you're getting them to eat. You're slowly moving it, you're getting them to eat it. Sometimes though, they don't want to eat and you got to make them react. And this is a technique that really starts picking up when the water gets up into the 50s. These fish get a little bit more reactive. So what I like to use is baits like, in the water's 50, 52, 53. Something like a flat-sided square bill. This bait is awesome. You can throw this around shallower cover. Those fish that are maybe up here a little bit shallower. It's that flat-sided crankbait, so it's got a that tighter wobble. It's not a big, wide wobbling crankbait, and it's an excellent bait. Now, again, if you're on like that clear body of water, the deeper reservoirs, those fish are going to be a little bit deeper still. You can go with a deeper diving crankbait, but more of a flat-sided crankbait. And that's a great one. Throw it on like a 7-foot medium rod, whatever you got. Depending on the bait, if you're throwing deep water cranks, you might have to beef up your gear, but whatever. Throw it on a crank, just a simple cranking setup. Medium heavy rod. Well, more of a medium moderate rod, somewhere in there, with like 15-pound fluorocarbon, and you're all set. And then as the water starts to get a little warmer, more into that 55, 56, not to 60. Once it hits 60, I'm more looking for spawning fish. But when it's still just right below 60, there's not quite spawning. That's when I go to a regular crankbait. 55 to 60 to almost 60 degrees. 55 to to where they start spawning. Like I said, I'll go to a regular crankbait. This is a KVD 1.5. It's actually silent. You can do whatever you want, depending on the fish. You could throw rattles in there, whatnot. But this is a silent one here. It's got a piece of braid stuck on the hook. And so yeah, a KVD 1.5, and that's going to be really good because now, even if you're on a deep reservoir or deeper lake, once the water is in the, gets into the 55-degree range, those fish they're gonna be up there. And not all fish. The fish, especially if you're on a bigger lake, the fish, they do it at different times. Some fish will be up there spawning, some fish will still be out deep. But when that water's around 55, I'm a shallow water fisherman. I get up there shallow, and I like to throw things like your square bills, spinner baits, stuff like that. Those reaction shallow water baits like that, square bills, spinner baits. I love to throw when that water gets a little bit warmer. Those fish are up shallow and they're getting ready. They're up there feeding. They're looking for places to spawn. I love to throw those spinner baits and those square bills. And then also going back to the jig. Some days they will react really good. When they're when they're up there feeding, or up there in that warmer water looking to spawn, looking for places to bed. They will be more reactive and they will hit spinner baits and crankbaits. But some days they're up there, maybe you have a little cold snap come in or something, because the spring is very unpredictable, Like I said here, one day it could be 60-something degrees, next day it would be snowing. So it could be, have a couple nice days, the water rises, fish push up shallow, then all of a sudden you have a cold snap, and those fish are still up shallow, but now they're less active, they're not going to react to a reaction bait as well. So then you go to something like a jig and flip that jig around up shallow, So kind of play with these couple baits. Like I said, there's many other baits you can catch fish on this time of year. These are just some of my favorite ways to do it, and especially for my lakes that I have, more shallow. I fish a lot of shallow, dirtier water lakes this time of year. Those baits work really good for me. But, go out, experiment, find some baits that work good for you. Fishing should get good here pretty soon, and I'll see you guys in the next video.